So recently there have been some headlines for F1 that haven't been the best PR-wise. Now, as easy as it would be for me to pick at low-hanging fruit like that, I'm gonna restrain myself and not talk about how Christian Horner has brought a whole new meaning to Drive to Survive. I'm not gonna say that because it'd just be too easy. Instead, I want to focus on a deeper and larger issue facing the sport. So let's do a deep dive on F1, some of the issues at hand, and what the future might look like for the world's premier motorsport. So, all of the following issues can be traced back to 2017. In 2017, Formula One was brought out by an American media company called Liberty Media. Liberty Media has an incredibly impressive portfolio with companies like SiriusXM, Live Nation, the Atlanta Braves, and more. They are worth countless billions of dollars and know a thing or two about running billion-dollar companies. Prior to the Liberty Media buyout, F1 wasn't having any particularly large issues apart from an actual clinical retard running the whole thing. But as a whole, they had solid races, a large following worldwide, great fan attendance, and great teams competing. All of that was with one glaring exception though. Formula One was never particularly successful in the US of A. Formula One in the United States have a relationship similar to the one you've had with that one goth girlfriend. A great idea at first, and the beginning was everything you dreamed of, but in the end, it was a terrible idea overall. Most races in the US after the 70s were total failures. Races like Caesar's Palace, Dallas, Phoenix, and more barely lasted more than 1 or 2 seasons, and honestly were half-assed attempts at drawing in American fans. The biggest failure to date so far, though, was the 2005 United States GP. There are a million videos on this race, but the TLDR is this. Going into 2005, the surface at Indianapolis was redone. At the time, there were 2 tire suppliers, Michelin and Bridgestone. The new surface caused increased friction and stress to the tires, which the Bridgestones could withstand. The Michelin tires, however, could not, and this caused some monumental accidents. Michelin advised teams that the tires wouldn't be safe past 10 laps, and after that, they were likely to jihad themselves. After a ton of back and forth between the teams, the FIA, Michelin, and more, all of the Michelin teams ended up not racing, leading to stunning pictures like this, where only 6 cars ended up starting the race. It also led to this stunning image of Thiago Monteiro on the podium. Anyways though, fans that attended the race were understandably fuming, and this whole thing led to F1 pulling out of the US in 2007, and they wouldn't return until 2012. After 2012 though, things went relatively smoothly from there on out. All that being said though, Liberty Media had the monumental task of expanding F1 into the US and the world as a whole. They started by giving F1 a new sleek logo, an awesome soundtrack, and an overall new modern vibe to the sport. It was a good first step, but the next big step was the key they needed to really take it to the next level. During the 2018 season, Netflix camera crews followed 8 of the 10 teams throughout the season, giving unrivaled access behind the scenes at just about every race. The drama, high stakes, glitz and glamour is exactly what millennial women around the world latched onto, and Drive to Survive helped catapult F1 to the next level. It exploded in popularity all over the world, but did particularly well in the US. It did so well that in the years following the release of the first season, Formula One added 2 more races to the calendar in America, and that is where the issues start. These new terrible races. The first new American race to be added to the calendar was the Miami GP. This is a race that F1 had to effectively ram through to get it onto the calendar, as almost no one in the area wanted it. Originally, it was supposed to be a street circuit that went over a bridge and was in downtown Miami. However, for both safety and logistical reasons, this was changed to the beautiful destination of, drumroll please ladies and gentlemen, the parking lot of an NFL stadium. When I think F1, that's what I think of. Beautiful tracks like Monaco, Spa, the Red Bull Ring, Suzuka, and a parking lot. Now, in theory, holding it in a parking lot does bring a bonus, if you could call it that. Track designers should have free reign over how they get to build the circuit, as it's effectively an empty canvas. I mean, autocross events do it all the time. But no, that would be too easy and, most importantly, too good for fans. They somehow managed to build one of the worst tracks on the calendar. The on-track racing sucks, and the surface is slippery and, in turn, also sucks. For Formula One, though, it was never about the on-track racing. For the Miami GP, it was always going to be about the spectacle that came with it. Formula One leaned in heavy with the whole Miami Vice vibe, hyping the hell out of this race. This was supposed to be effectively the second coming of Christ, judging by the way they promoted it. With the crazy promo and hype, the higher-ups in F1 somehow convinced themselves that fans would pay ridiculous amounts of money for the race. Ticket prices started, mind you, let me say that again, started at almost $600. To put that into perspective, the rough average average for general admission to an F1 race on the calendar is around $200, going as low as $150 for races like Hungary, which is a far superior track. That's around 3 times the price for the cheapest tickets, with the most expensive tickets going for almost $3,000. Oh wait, no, sorry, read that wrong. $30,000 fucking dollars for a top-tier ticket. So your options are either to buy a used Ford Focus RS or Civic Type R, or go watch billboards on wheels put around a parking lot from a fancy room. Whatever the people planning this were smoking, I want a lot of it. And anybody with so much as a room temperature IQ could have told you this, but they obviously struggled to sell tickets. Prices have since righted, if you could call it that, and now you can get general admission tickets for around half of the original price, and even then I'd say that's way too much money. This was obviously not a good look for F1 among actual fans and left a sour taste in everyone's mouth. This was a pretty blatant cash grab, and that was shown by the infestation of celebrities and influencers with so much plastic surgery they could be put in a fucking recycling bin attending the race, with the key thing missing being the actual fucking fans. But I'd argue that the worst part about the whole Miami GP debacle is the fact that we're stuck with this goddamn race until the 2030s, as the Miami GP is under a decade-long contract, something literally no one asked for. F1 had made up their mind long before the race was ever held. They didn't care what the racing looked like, how it affected fans. All that mattered was the money. This was bad, but was made worse when rumors started spreading that F1 was going to add another American race to the calendar. This one would be another street circuit in the sleaziest city of America, sunny Las Vegas, made famous by a fat opioid addict thrusting his hips on stage while marrying underage women, and hotels where the rooms are already covered in someone else's semen. You don't even have to masturbate yourself. Now that's hospitality. Anyways, same as Miami, it's a shitty street circuit that resembles a barnyard animal. Fans weren't thrilled about another crap American race being added to the calendar, and again, tickets were arguably even more ridiculous. Tickets started at $500, which I will say is cheaper than Miami, but I'm not joking when I say this, it was a standing room only.
What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck is this world? What have they done to us? What did they do to us?
What the fuck? I don't want to sound like a Karen, I really don't, but that's just insulting. They literally herd you like cattle before a slaughterhouse to watch these things go around a shit street circuit. Jesus Christ. Anyways, the real circus started at the beginning of the weekend when in FP1, Carlos Sainz got ass fucked until his anus prolapsed. Sorry, read that wrong. I meant to say his car ran over a drain cover and got its ass end blown out. Through no fault of his own, he got a 10-place grid penalty because of track organizers' total incompetence. Because of that incident, FP1 was entirely canceled and FP2 was delayed until the early hours of the next morning. This was a problem for fans who bought tickets for Thursday only, as they only got to see a couple minutes of cars on track, if that, and that was it. F1 offered some crap compensation and a lawsuit was opened up. It was this whole big thing. These issues were on top of the fact that F1 forced hotels and businesses to fork over unholy amounts of money, or F1 would put up barriers to prevent people from watching. They already did it with the walkway bridges over the circuit, and police actually wrote citations to people who stopped to watch the race. The track itself was crap, and drivers struggled with traction issues all weekend. Not to mention that the on-track action was also, coincidentally, very crap. Except I will say for a battle at the end between Leclerc and Perez, everything else was just garbage. All of these things were bad enough, but the worst thing is, in my opinion, it makes US race fans look like total Neanderthals. This country has some of the best racetracks on the planet. It's not up for debate. Racetracks like Laguna Seca, Watkins Glen, the Indy Road Course, and so many more. Granted, I will say, most of these tracks would need costly upgrades before they could host an F1 race, since almost none of them hold an FIA Grade 1 license. But F1 has already shelled out ungodly amounts of money to ram these races through red tape and onto the calendar. I don't think that it's debatable that for real race fans, that money would have been much better spent upgrading these other racetracks to host an F1 race. A lot of people say 3 races in the US is too much, but honestly, I really think that 3 races is perfect. I'm obviously biased, but something people overseas have to keep in mind is that we have 1/3 of a billion people living in this country, and it's the size of a continent. We can't just drive or take a train down to Austin. It would be the equivalent of if F1 only had a race at Silverstone for all of Europe to go see, which I will say, at this rate, I wouldn't be shocked if it happened. Anyways, these American races are bad, but there are more, even worse tracks that have somehow weaseled their way onto the race calendar. While all these races were being put onto the calendar, more races across the globe were added. They take place in the Middle East and show just how hypocritical F1 has become. The first race I want to talk about is the Qatar GP. This race was originally added as a last-minute sub for the Australian GP during the whole COVID issue. Now, as a substitute, it's alright. It's a circuit that F1 can race at, which is better than not racing at all. The layout of the track is pretty terrible and closely resembles the Caesar's Palace GP, which is widely regarded as the worst Grand Prix in the history of F1. Actually, let me back that up. Let me rephrase that. The layout of this track is almost a copy-paste, bar-for-bar, corner-for-corner copy of the Caesar's Palace GP. As a circuit, this works pretty well for MotoGP, but for F1, it was disappointing at best. But again, I want to stress, it was a last-minute sub, and it's better to have a race than not race at all. That is, until a little while later, when F1 announced that Qatar would return to the calendar on another decade-long contract. This sucked, but it does have the leg up over the American races because, like I keep saying, at least it's an actual fucking racetrack and not a parking lot. A stone's throw away, pun intended, Saudi Arabia was making similar moves. The Saudi Arabian GP signed a contract in 2020 for the race to be held until at least 2030, and you guessed it, it's another street circuit. Exactly what all fans are begging for. This is known as the fastest street circuit on the calendar, which is honestly, I gotta say, pretty cool in theory. But this track has been widely criticized for being unsafe for drivers, and this was perfectly shown when, all jokes aside, Mick Schumacher had a super scary crash. This circuit has a lot of high-speed blind corners that you need to 110% commit to, and if you cock up even a little bit, the consequences can be both tremendously costly and painful. These dangerous conditions are compounded by the fact that the track surface here tends to be quite slippery because, again, it's a street circuit. I could go on and on about both these Middle East races, but it's the same thing we talked about in America. A playground for the ultra-wealthy to get a dick measuring contest. I don't want to sound like a hippie. Now, right around the time these tracks were being added to the calendar, F1 was balls deep in one of their BS equality campaigns. The We Race As One campaign was shoved down fans' throats, promoting equality worldwide and puppies and kisses and all that. Now, joking aside, I think there does obviously need to be more representation in not just F1, but racing series all over the world, which is why this next part pisses me off so much. F1 was shoveling that steaming puddle of Hershey squirts down our throats while signing race deals with countries like Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Countries, mind you, that have some of the worst human rights records on the planet. Highlights include, but aren't limited to, utilizing slave labor, murdering journalists who are critical of the ruling regime, criminalizing homosexuality, mass executions, being in bed with the Taliban, bombing civilians, women's rights violations, violent suppression of protest, and so much more. Trust me when I say I have just barely scratched the surface. These aren't isolated incidents. These are widespread, regular occurrences in these countries. Now, this is nothing new for F1, I gotta say that. Previous countries to host races include China, Russia, Bahrain, and more, with the latter even having to cancel races due to the Arab Spring. The race fans of these countries, I will say, have just as much of a right as you or I to host a race in their country and enjoy it for themselves. However, the dark reality is that the leaders of these countries pay ridiculous amounts of money to host these races as a form of sports washing. I cannot think of a more public, clear-cut example of blatant hypocrisy from an organization. They plastered these rainbow flags on everything at these races, while the people who wear those flags are punished with life in prison, beatings, and more. This isn't political. I'm not advocating for one side or the other. I'm just stating the facts of the case. Right now, F1 is for sale for the highest bidder, and just like a whore working the corner, it's getting gangbanged by a bunch of rich pricks with money. All that is bad enough, but these shitty street circuits are replacing other actual racetracks that have since left the calendar. Tracks like Hockenheim and soon Barcelona are being dropped for these shit circuits. So with all that wonderfully positive news, what's the future for F1 look like? Well, funny enough, we do have something to compare it to, as race fans suffered through something eerily similar not too long ago. In the late 90s till the mid-2000s, NASCAR absolutely exploded in the States. It's hard to believe now, but back then, NASCAR was competing with the NFL in TV ratings. It got so big that movies like Cars and Talladega Nights were made to satisfy people's craze for all things NASCAR. NASCAR tried to jump on the trend and abandoned core racetracks like North Wilkesboro for new state-of-the-art superspeedways like Texas. NASCAR, similar to F1, abandoned core race fans for fans that were only there because it was trendy. The effects of these moronic decisions cannot be understated, and the outcome has since been catastrophic for NASCAR. Once NASCAR showed core fans that they didn't care, those fans left for other series like IMSA, IndyCar, Supercars, and more. Now, at the time, NASCAR didn't care too much because they still had a ton of fans who were there because it was trendy. However, once those fans got bored with the series and started leaving, NASCAR was left with no one. Ratings and race attendance started tanking hard, and these new super speedways like Texas now struggle to sell even an eighth of what they sold 2 decades ago. Texas especially is facing deep shit, and there are talks of the whole track being sold for the land underneath it. Keep in mind, this was a track that was only made 20 years ago, and when it was first built, this was supposed to be the mecca of not just NASCAR tracks, but tracks worldwide. In my non-expert opinion, F1 is already starting to show its cracks. The fact that these flashy, fancy races are struggling to sell tickets is incredibly telling of the future these tracks hold. These tracks and events as whole were supposed to be the mecca of F1, a perfect meshing of diehard F1 fans and casual fans looking for a cool experience. It is neither of those things and has become a playground for the elites to showcase ungodly amounts of wealth. I'm not saying F1 is supposed to be some grassroots, working man's, good old boys motorsport, because it's never been that. But these tracks showcase some next level fuckery and a total disconnect from what actual fans want to see. Do I think F1 will go belly up? Absolutely not. There's too much money, history, and prestige for that to ever happen. However, I do think F1 has hit a ceiling, and it's only going to be downhill from here. I could be very wrong, and maybe there's something that I'm missing, but piss poor ticket sales, lackluster racing, and a terrible reception from race fans, honestly, I don't see a bright future for the series. F1 has sunk so much money into these races that they can't afford for them to not perform well, and so far, they just aren't.